Hi, I'm Andy Dikopoulos. Welcome to Science Minds, sponsored by the Autism Research Training Program here at the Mind Institute. Science Minds is a platform to tell the stories of scientists, researchers, and thinkers in the field of neurodevelopmental disabilities. In this podcast, we aim to go beyond the science and delve into experiences that have led people to the field and have helped shape their thinking and perspectives toward inquiry in science. I'm pleased to be joined today by Marjorie Solomon. Dr. Marjorie Solomon is a professor of psychiatry at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the University of California, Davis, associate director of the Mind Institute, and associate director of the Imaging Research Center. Dr. Solomon's laboratory studies cognitive development in autistic children, adolescents, and young adults. Her work utilizes neuropsychological and cognitive neuroscience methods, including functional magnetic resonance imaging. Thank you so much for joining us today, Marjorie.
I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's just kind of dive into some questions. First off, I'm really interested to hear about sort of what inspires you to be a scientist and your work in this field.
Well, I think all of us that are scientists, we really are inspired by the desire to know things and to know why people are the way they are and how things work. And for me, I've always been fascinated by how people work. Science just provides us, the science of autism research just provides us with so many questions that we could delve into. And as a clinician, because I started as a clinician, I would find that a lot of the people that I worked with exhibited really interesting behaviors. Some kids would talk for hours about black toilet seats or vacuum cleaners. You know, others would be extremely anxious and you wouldn't really know why. Some could tell you everything you wanted to know about planets. And as a very curious person, I very much wanted to understand what is making this person tick, what in the environment is making this person do what they do, what in the brain, what in the body is making this person do what they do. And so I think having a curiosity about human behavior is really a fundamental driving force for many of us working here at the Mind, especially with behavioral scientists. I think also a lot of us have an abiding interest, and I know me, in trying to help people. And science can also be about helping people. If we do something, someone is happier or things get better for them. And so I think we like to experiment and try to figure out what can we do that will actually help people. Another part of science that's really phenomenal and inspirational is that we get to work with a lot of young scientists. And so watching young scientists, watching the light bulbs go on, watching the really smart insights they have about things that are going on around them, watching how they get better when they work in a community of scientists, those things are all incredibly inspirational as well. And I also think that one of the biggest inspirations is watching how your science interacts with the science of your colleagues, be they mentees or be they, more senior than you or, be they your peers, and watching how the sum is always greater than the parts, and seeing the really amazing ideas that emerge when like-minded people, all fascinated and interested about questions about biology and behavior, come together and are able to reach amazing heights together.
Well, and I think that the way that you sort of maybe bring in sort of your clinical experience, as well as then sort of like the more hard science of like doing fMRIs and looking like very closely at the brain, I think that's a really cool sort of merging of these two areas that kind of brings all of what you're sort of talking about in terms of the inspiration of like inquiry and searching and asking and answering really kind of complex questions about human behavior. It's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm interested too, and you have a kind of an eclectic, you said earlier when we were talking, and like kind of an eclectic background. You studied Latin American studies as an undergrad, then you went on and got a master's in business administration after that. I read in one of your bios that you worked as a banker for a while. and then you've arrived in the field of autism and developmental disabilities. So I'd really enjoy hearing a little bit about your trajectory and your experiences that have led you to where you are today.
Well, I would have to say that my career cannot be described as a straight line. That's for darn sure. I think the interest in Latin American studies really always stemmed from trying to understand people and culture. And, that was the intellectual driver of my desire to do that major. I also enjoyed speaking to people in foreign languages. But when I graduated, I really had a thought that I would probably do something in international business. I was really good at organizing people and leading things and running things, and I think that kind of drove me to the MBA path. But I hit a point in which I felt it wasn't a particularly fulfilling path for me. I think basically due to the sort of driving curiosity and intellectual nature of who I am, that I really wanted to be sure that my work was addressing questions that I found meaningful to my core. So I decided when we moved to Sacramento, because I had lived previously on the East Coast, when we moved to Sacramento, I decided that I would go back to graduate school. And so I went to UC Berkeley and was in the process of getting my PhD when our eldest child began to show autism-like characteristics. My PhD was in social and personality psychology, and I had planned all along to later train to become a clinician as well. Just watching that behavior in front of me and trying to figure out how to explain it, both on a day-to-day level and, to predict what was going to happen in his life, and to predict, the biological substrates of all of that just began to fully captivate me. And so I'm probably employee, I was trying to think of, I'm employee number 2 or 3 here, or 4 here maybe at this point. David Amaral was here before me. Brenda Shelton was here before me, but I'm not sure there are that many people that were here before me. I was a recipient of one of the Mind Scholar Fellowships, which is what we did before we gave other kinds of grants or did the APP. And so I was able to do a postdoctoral fellowship here. I started the Social Skills Training Group program, which runs as a clinical activity to this day. And I was very, very fortunate to have a mentored year or two, I believe, with Sally Ozanoff, who had just come here. So, and I think it was that experience working with Sally, and I had been very clinically engaged, and as my PhD is a research PhD, I was a trained researcher, but having that experience to see autism research, with somebody whose work I had greatly admired, was a real catalyst for me. And I began to really love trying to, in a more rigorous way, query behavior and, enjoy the parsimony of writing good grants and good papers. And so I think that was really a turning point for me. And that was followed, I began, like you said, I got really interested in how do we take behavior and how do we understand it on a more fundamental level. And for me, understanding behavior without understanding biology just didn't seem like the way I wanted to go. So I applied for and received a K08 award where I worked with Cam Carter over in the Imaging Center for a bunch of years. He has a schizophrenia lab there, and he's obviously an imaging expert. And so I learned functional neuroimaging and began to bring that into my work to try to investigate some of the behaviors that I observed as a scientist, and just as a clinician too. I also later was fortunate to be able to learn how to write grants. So I've received several grants.
I'd love to hear about them and some of the, kind of your continued trajectory. That'd be great.
In those days, the first grant you wanted to get was what was called a K08. It was one of the NIH-funded training grants. And so, bridging into the topic of mentorship, I've spoken of Sally and I've spoken of Cam, and, I think Cam has been my longest term mentor of the group, but David Amaral here really helped me to get my grant writing skills honed. And that led to my writing a successful K, which led me to be able to really stay in Cam's lab and really train in imaging, for a period of years. And, so that was an amazing experience. After that, I had begun to work with David and also Christine Nordahl, and Peter Mundy was working with us at the time, to put together an application for an ACE grant, which wasn't initially funded, but we all wrote R01s after that. So I wrote 2 R01s, one being an R01 to continue the work that I had done with Cam, which was in the study of cognitive control and how cognitive control in adolescence was predictive of early adulthood outcomes. And then with David and Christine, we were in a middle childhood period. So I wrote a grant about the development of intellectual trajectories, and that's what I'm going to be speaking about at the Distinguished Lecture Series. So I was fortunate to get R1s in both those areas, and later we did successfully compete for an ACE grant to get, and I was the head of a clinical trial in that ACE grant. So that is the STAR trial, where we've been looking at the development of anxiety in younger children. Along the way, I was fortunate, a grateful patient helped endow my chair, and it was very much a lifespan development in autism grant, which really worked well because, one thing that's characterized my research, in addition to being very clinically rooted, is also that it's very lifespan developmentally oriented. I work with young kids all the way up to, now young adulthood has become a real area of fascination. So, and I guess in the next chapter, I've really been working hard to try to get, one thing I've really observed in the course of my career is that the biggest determinant of life satisfaction, because now I have watched the kids from social skills when they were 5, 8 years old grow into adults over the course of my career. The biggest determinant of whether you're happy in life, which is the goal for everyone, is work. You have to find a job that's meaningful to you. And so in this next phase of my career, I'm really interested in digging in and trying to figure out how we can help people with autism to have more fulfilling jobs and careers. Yeah. And one of the challenging pieces for me, at least, is this isn't science research. This is more services research, or more just about systems in our state and how we can get the systems to align properly to fund this kind of work.
You're such a multidimensional person, and that's evident through what we're discussing. And I think that a lot of people who aren't in the field or who aren't scientists or academics maybe think of scientists and academics kind of unidimensionally, sitting in a lab, conducting experiments, writing papers, but there's a lot more to it, as you're pointing out, writing grants, publishing, mentorship, being a mentor to being a mentee to others, looking at hard sciences like brain imaging, as well as like you're talking about sort of this new phase of really like more service oriented, systems oriented inquiry. And I'm wondering, for you, what's the thread that holds all of that together? Because I think that people possess sort of kind of innate skills that are unique to them that really help them be successful, maybe in a multitude of different areas and environments. And I'm wondering what you sort of feel like is the thread for you between all of this.
I think it's the two things that I mentioned of curiosity and wanting to understand the way things work, and also a desire to help and leave us in a better place after I'm gone, And so I think those two threads run through everything. I also think, you asked a little bit in there about why, what are my skills? And, I think that I have the science skills from my training and from all the great mentorship I've received and the papers I've written and the grants I've gotten. But I also do have that MBA background. And, I'm in a family, my husband is not a scientist. My husband is actually, he stayed in the business path, and, he is a successful business person. And so I live, sort of vicariously in his world as well. And then I have the MBA and the past experience of my own. So I would say that, running a lab, while not always easy, is probably a little less foreign to me than to others. Doing financial things is less hard. And so I've taken that a little bit into the direction of leadership. I served as the treasurer of INSAR for several years, where I got to kind of pull those skills out of the closet and dust them off and, look at balance sheets and income statements. And also here doing leadership, I've watched a lot of leaders come and go here, well, not a lot, but several. And when Len came, I really think things took a turn for the much better. Len's an extremely collaborative leader. So using kind of my business skills, I have been working with Len. I'm an associate director here at the Mind, and I've been working with Len a lot on development-oriented projects, strategic planning-oriented projects, which pick up some of my old skills, and kind of weave them in.
You've touched on this point quite a bit in our conversation so far, but I'd love for you to expand on mentorship. And kind of what mentorship has looked like for you, both people who have mentored you. You've mentioned like Cam and Sally, but any other mentors that have kind of stuck out in your career, as well as your kind of work as a mentor for others.
Well, just to say, with respect to mentorship that I've received, I think I'm kind of the it takes a village postdoc, because I came in and I wasn't really fully affiliated with any particular lab. So, I've really been, in those days it was more thought that you needed to quote unquote make it on your own. And so I have, and I've kind of pursued that path. But along the way I've been helped by so many people. I mentioned Sally Ozanoff, but Sally Rogers was so kind to include me in some of her work early on with Nurit Bauminger in Israel on friendship, the development of friendship in children with autism. And Nurit's a lifelong friend, as is Sally. David Amaral really helped me to write grants, and later working with Irva Hertz-Peixoto on resubmissions. Boy, I learned a lot about how beating the horse, and beating it again, and making sure it's really dead. Yeah. You've got to nail every one of those reviewer comments. Yeah. In some of the collaborative stuff I've done, I took a little twist into behavioral neuroscience for a while and worked with Jackie Crowley and Jill. And we took some of my work, my imaging work on reward processing, and we were able to do it in mice using the Bussy touchscreen, which was really fascinating. So that was a great fun activity, seeing if you could take, your behavioral work and see if it translated, backwards. Mm-hmm. So I would say that those, have been great mentors I've had. Yeah. Now, mentoring people, has also been quite an adventure. It's a little bit like parenting, and I am a parent. So I think I brought a little bit of that to the equation. I've had some mentees who've been really, really successful in the way I might define success in terms of being in an R1 university, but I've had other mentees who've pursued their own paths. And my goal as a mentor is to give the person the resources they need and to help them to make the transition from being a student who's on the take, who's taking classes, who's getting a lot of feedback, and really having to do it yourself. And that can be a difficult transition, but it's always really wonderful and delightful to see somebody, like I said at the beginning, with the light bulb going on, or somebody who's really getting better or having success or developing their own ideas, and so that's been really enjoyable. And I am one of the co-directors of the ARTP, and I think that that's another institutional way that I can help see that mentorship goes on here. So I like that piece of it too, trying to help plan the classes that are going to make, your lives more meaningful and your careers, whatever they may be, more successful. I think this is a great idea, incidentally. Good job. But I also actually particularly enjoy mentoring research assistants. We've had a lot of research assistants in our labs. You get them and they're much less fully formed, and you get the delight of launching them to great graduate programs. I mean, we've had people go on to everything from physics PhD programs, speech pathology, social work, clinical psych, medical school, it's always really wonderful to watch that happen too, because then they start to really launch themselves on their life path.
One last thing I'd like to talk with you about is, and again, you've sort of brought this up, especially in terms of mentorship, but just the role of collaboration in your work, and what does collaboration mean to you, and how do you see it fitting in with your career?
I've had the wonderful opportunity to collaborate with many people over time, and so kind of the feeling that I spoke to in some of your other questions about seeing how when smart people, because that's one of the beauties of academia, virtually everyone we work with is really smart, and just seeing how people who are all curious, the way I'm curious, but curious about slightly different things, we all come together to tackle a common problem, to set up a program of research, to answer a question, or to write a paper about a subject. So I think, to me, that synergy is the ultimate form of collaboration, and I think we have to do that. I think, especially these days, translational research is really what's wanted and needed in the world, and by granting agencies and by the journals that accept our papers. So I think it really requires, though, that you not have a fragile ego, because none of us can know everything, and so as long as you have a good nose for picking other people that have values that are similar to yours and who are strong scientists in their respective areas, you kind of have to let them educate you. And for a lot of academics, it's very scary to be stupid in front of someone else. But if you can get a group of people that have mutual respect together and, are confident enough that they can let other people educate them and make their own contributions, I think that collaboration is for sure the way to go. I think just saying that not every collaboration works, so I think you have to experiment, and not every collaboration works all the time. So sometimes collaborations come and go as different things become more and less interesting to the people that are involved. I also think it's a hard skill too for junior people sometimes, because really junior people may not have the gravitas to bring something that's that different and meaningful to a high-level collaboration. You always have something to bring, but it may not be high enough level, so it takes a little while to kind of get your feet wet in some collaborations, and you may have to search for some other ones if some don't work, because no collaborators really like to feel like they're carrying someone else. So, I think that's can be a challenging issue, but obviously collaboration is the way to go in today's world.
The sense that I've gotten, and having sort of seen you tangentially here at the Mind Institute and as an ARTP fellow and some of the other activities you're involved in, I see you as a really strong leader, and I'm wondering, in your experience, how do you help cultivate the right kind of atmosphere in these collaborative arrangements? Like you mentioned, the mutual respect and having synergy, but what are some things that how do you approach these collaborative groups to help them be successful?
I don't think I'm a particularly high ego person. Mm-hmm. So I model asking questions and, maybe being naive about some things so that, that other people feel like it's okay to not have to know everything. I also think it's really important to kind of keep everybody together and on the same page and build an esprit de corps. So little silly things like making sure you stay in touch with everybody, which can be really hard, and I certainly can, I could be faulted on that at times too. Mm-hmm. And everything here is aspirational, not everything we can do at every time. But and actually one of, I think I like people. You know, you've chosen to do podcasting. I don't mind being interviewed. So I like people, I enjoy people, I get energy from other people. So I think I bring that into a collaboration. And so I naturally want to take the people that are shyer and bring them out and make them feel more comfortable, you know, and I naturally want to make sure that the students are feeling good about their collaboration. And, you know, I think there's really been a sea change since I came here in terms of allowing people to receive credit. When I was a postdoc early on, in some of my initial, you know, forays, when I did not have the time to not get credit for things, people were very, you know, nope, you know, you're not a senior person, you don't get credit. And now, fortunately, we do give credit a little bit more generously, you know, than was done back in the day. And so I think you want to give people credit to the degree that they meet the criteria for IC, JME, you know, publication standards, but you want to give people credit and you want to make everybody feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves.
Well, this is a really great opportunity to just sit and chat and get to know each other, and I think you have very valuable insight for the field and for what's happening at the Mind Institute as well, so thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was founded in 1998 with the promise to reduce and prevent the disabilities that can be associated with autism and other neurodevelopmental conditions. Every day, our clinicians and researchers make progress on that promise. Our groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other conditions associated with disability are helping affected individuals achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website or our social media platforms to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.